what are the core values of your business and how do these values align to the sustainability criteria that is more relevant to your business model.
Our featured speaker today is the current country director for Swiss Contact in El Salvador, the founder of PGB Consulting and Colin Banning Consultoria, and an unstoppable force for sustainability, innovation, and entrepreneurship across Latin America. Colin, it's a great pleasure to have you return to the podcast as our featured guest today. Thank you so much for being willing to share this part of your journey with us.
Thank you so much, guys. Greetings from Lucerne, Switzerland. So I'm looking forward for this conversation. It's great to be back in the show and see you all, guys, good old friends.
The honor's ours for sure. I know it's been quite some time since we connected. So last time we spoke, I believe that you had just started with Swiss Contact. So congratulations on becoming the country director for Swiss Contact in El Salvador. Can you kind of talk about what led you to take this position? It sounds pretty interesting.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think the last time we talked, I was just getting started, probably a couple of weeks, and I was managing a technical assistance project in Guatemala. And things have evolved a little bit. I have been working on entrepreneurship development for Central America, specifically social entrepreneur on vulnerable populations such as return migrants and also people with disabilities. So we have developed the entrepreneurial framework for them, created financial inclusion products, and also trying to get social reintegration in the case that some of them might not have that entrepreneurial spirit and want to look up for a job. But that's a little bit of what I have been doing over the last couple of years. Also, some of the other projects that I'm working with Swiss Contact revolve around green businesses on circular economy and green entrepreneurship, which is another arena that we are actually now touching. I was just recently in Colombia exploring options for green businesses through waste management processes and circular economy best practices. So I think that was for me a more meaningful job in the sense that it's nice to run a business, but it's better if you run a business with purpose. And it's even better if you help build the ecosystem with the same purpose, right? So working here has really drove my attention into how am I projecting my career in the long term, the kind of legacy that I want to leave behind and the impact that I want to have on the people. This is something that really enables us some tools and vehicles to help those vulnerable populations to reach those goals, right? So at some point that persuaded me I sold my company actually. I just had an exit 2 weeks ago. You guys remember that I had another health tech startup that was called App Doctor. So I sold my stock. I have an exit. The consulting firm has now been joined and merged with another regional consulting firm that I met also through another boot camper. You guys know Andrea Mazariegos, that she has quite a long story with the community as well. Now I have this consulting firm merger that happened just last year before I became a country director. And that was mainly to avoid conflict of interest because we were kind of servicing the same clients that I work as partners in Swiss Context. So you don't want to do good things that are perceived as bad things, right? So we had to take those decisions. The firm is still running without me. I eventually get called into a few projects that I like and I want to work with because also my time is limited. And recently just sold my stock on the health tech startup as well. So I'm fully dedicated right now into this international development work with Swiss Contact, and that was pretty much it.
Congratulations on your exit. I think it's so powerful to be able to take when you're like dealing with all these different things to then restructure and take your focus on, the particular thing you want. I think that's a really smart move. Thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit more in detail about what you're doing with Colin Banning Consultoria?
Yes, that's also part of a merger that happened with this other regional consulting firm. It's a Costa Rican consulting firm that these guys spin off from Ernst and Young, and they founded their own consulting firm. And they are working pretty much different pillars. They are working legal services. They are working also on ESG services, which is the arena that I'm actually helping with Colin Banning Consultoria. And also, they are working on legal services for funds and impact investment. These guys are called ITOS, and they're based in San Jose, Costa Rica. So, right now, what we are doing with them is supporting all their ESG business unit configuration, as well as not only defining the service offering, but also their pricing structure and helping to deal with some of their clients as well. And I actually happen to manage all my clients through them right now. So that's a little bit of what we're doing. So that was, I think, a successful merger. We spent maybe, wow, more than 9 months on the back and forth between negotiations on how do we want to manage the merger, and the terms and conditions, and how do we want to do the transition and all the change management process with our clients. It has ended up being a positive thing. So both consulting firms are now merged into this one single regional firm, along with the client's portfolio being transferred as well.
I see. Thank you so much. And can you share us a little bit more about, like, in depth in regards to the ESG work, what some of the challenges and victories are in scaling that?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest challenge is to help people understand where's the value in implementing these services, right? And this not only a trendy topic, but also how this is becoming something that's needed in a corporate world, but also in the small businesses community. In terms of evaluating what's the impact of the business that I'm running, how can I make it more sustainable, but at the same time profitable, right? So it's kind of living by the motto of we have to be economically profitable in order to be environmentally friendly and also socially responsible. So, in that regard, we help them strategize, okay, what are the core values of your business, and how do these values align to the sustainability criteria that is more relevant to your business model, right? Out of that, we help you choose and prioritize some projects. How do we want to work this out and operate this strategy beyond just the fancy wording that can come with it, right? And after that is how can we also measure the impact that you're having in the long term, setting up a baseline that will help you benchmark yourself with your competitors, but also to understand what are your improvement opportunities. So that's a little bit of what we do for these guys. We're working with several clients in mostly agriculture business, but also in energy and construction sectors, which I think have one of the biggest impacts also on the environment, but also in the communities they work with. So it's all about community relationships and also environmental best practices, along with this project prioritization that I was mentioning. So it's really interesting to see the adoption, because at some point you get some resistance from the business owner saying, is this going to be really profitable? How can I make process improvements out of this? Because it's a very subjective idea, right? You interpret the sustainability in your own way and you pretty much have a concept. So part of our work is to educate them and help them understand where is the biggest impact that you do in your day-to-day operations, and how can you make this profitable and efficient at the same time. It's also socially responsible and environmentally friendly. Whether you're working something related to waste management, to water treatment, or also safety and occupational health and safety, right? Or even community relations. So we have to be able to be very flexible and agile in the terms that we can adapt this consulting framework to each line of business by understanding what's relevant to their core business model. And then, of course, how to prioritize projects that will not only make them look good, but also you can compare with the numbers and evaluate if they're really doing good or they're just greenwashing, right?
Greenwashing is such an interesting term. It's not one that I'm familiar with, but it completely makes sense in context because it's become so kind of trendy, right? To do things that are good for the environment. It's good for marketing in a way. But I really appreciate you kind of taking us through what it takes to maybe sweet talk a client into a solution that's good for the environment and good for them.
Yeah, but also if this is going to be reflected in their financial statements by the end of the year.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, they're a business and they're concerned about their bottom line. That makes complete sense. I was trying to read as much as I could about your updates. If I get some of it incorrect, please correct me. But I thought it was pretty incredible that you've made such an impact, during your time working with UN Conference on Trade and Development. And I read that you helped secure over 10 million in funding for development projects. Can you talk about how you started to work with UNCDTAD and what they probably have a nice little word that they say instead, right? Do they say
Yeah,
USITAD?
that's the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. You
Yeah.
know, I started to do some consulting work for them actually when I was on an MIT boot camp. So I remember sneaking out of those sessions with Bill in order to take a call with the UN. That's actually how I got started on all these ESG services that I just described. We created the framework and the methodology with these guys using what they call core indicators. So it's essentially how do you take the financial statements, profit and loss, the ledgers, the balances, to understand how much the company is really investing in sustainable business practices and how can you audit them, not only from a financial perspective but also from an operational standpoint, right? So um, that was a little bit of what I did with them, and that actually led into many different other arenas, right? So one of them is the consulting firm that you just saw, and the other one is actually the work that I'm doing right now with Swiss Contact, which has a lot to do with that as well. Those were interesting years. I spent 4 years with the United Nations as a consultant while I was running the company with TGV and also the other firm. This is how it got my attention to work on the sustainability and ESG arena, right? So I saw this was a powerful niche, and back then was really getting started in terms of how do private sector companies can understand and leverage all these frameworks and indicators and methodologies to make informed decisions on their business practices. So that's what we did. We did it with a few companies in Colombia. We did it with a few companies in Mexico, here in Guatemala, and also for quite few groups that are operating in the Central American region. That they were really interested into how, beyond just making a sustainability report that can make them look good, they can really create a management routine out of this in their business process. So that's how we got in, right? So we work a little bit of construction. The biggest cement company in Guatemala hired us to make that transformation process. And how do we align with their own business strategy, with their own KPIs and targets, but now from sustainability criteria that will affect some of the company departments? So we needed to work with the head of those departments and starting pretty much implementing the UN framework into their day to day. And that actually was a good learning opportunity for us to perfect the consulting product that then became what appealed to this Costa Rican firm to offer us the merger, right? And now it's actually a product that they sell.
Wow. I mean, I have to say, like, it's such a complex and interesting topic, sustainability in business, because it is so relevant, but in some ways so misunderstood, I guess is the appropriate term in the world. I'm just wondering, like, from your perspective, for businesses that are getting into working on in themselves being more sustainable, is that something that you feel businesses in general are able to really start to approach? Or do you think it's still very complex to sort of?
It's really complex in the sense that that should tell you where their priorities are, right? So, on that regard, then oh, I need to start um, making some changes and educating them and building awareness, and also telling them what's the long-term benefit with other external stakeholders, like for example the communities they work with. especially with agribusiness companies, the impact that they have on communities in water use, for example, public health with the use of pesticides and fertilizers. Um, they can have quite a negative impact if you don't measure that part of your process, but at the same time, the community may retaliate in a way that will impact your operations from a logistic and supply chain perspective, or also on a reputational scale. So that will cost you more money than implement a solid and robust strategy around sustainability. So that's our pitch whenever we're trying to get these guys to understand. And the same thing happened with Swiss Contact, right? Because even though we're an international NGO and we're Swiss based, we work with private sector companies in emerging economies. We try to make them understand what's the long term benefit, but in this case, investing in their people, right? Whether it is vocational education programs, green skills, or support local entrepreneurs that we're incubating with the framework that I was telling you, right? It's not just do good from a philanthropic standpoint, it's the pragmatic approach on doing business with someone that has everything you need to become one of your vendors.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And at the beginning of our conversation, when you were talking about your transition in becoming the country director for Swiss Contact, too, you were talking about working to make ideas for people with disabilities more of a reality. And I was kind of thinking about that in context of what you were just saying. What are some of the barriers that you've encountered with that, be they, actual, physical things that need to be changed or policies that need to be changed?
In countries like Latin America, definitely the policy is one of the first things you need to tackle because although a few countries have commissions to advocate at a Congress level for disabilities, people with disabilities, is not a visible group. So you have to help them gain visibility, but also develop the empathy on their condition, right? So the type of disability poses the different types of challenges that these groups are obviously facing every day, right? So how do you start from a regulator up to the Congress, up to getting something done? Andrea has done a great job in Swiss Contact on policy advocacy, for example, for these minorities, and she's the one actually leading the initiative on policy advocacy. Um, and Andrea is also an MIT boot camper from Guatemala. You might have uh, crossed paths with her a little bit, but she's been doing a great job in terms of getting bills revised and approved in the Congress here in Guatemala, but also the way that those bills will be then translated into specific projects that will benefit this population is something that we do in Swiss Contact, right? So I'll take the financial inclusion as an example, right? Because at some point, the people with disability, whether it's people with visual disability or any other disability, along with other minorities, right, such as returned migrants or indigenous women, normally they are not attractive subjects to credit from the traditional banking, right? So how do you make them bankable, right? Probably you have to start with a local credit union and work with that local credit union in develop new financial products that will enable them to be formal and get access to those type of products to start building their credit history, right? Along with their support that they may get from us in terms of the technical assistance on the business management, financial education, soft skills, because some of them might not even know how to read and write. So you have to be very, very empathetic with them and understand where they come from to really understand their needs. Because most of them work on the informal sector of the economy, not because they want or they don't have the capabilities or the capacity to set up a formal business, but they haven't also seen the value of doing it, right? From a tax perspective, or they will be busy on the day to day trying to get food to the plate. From that is where our project is not only working with regulators for them to understand the reality of these minorities, but then again, how do we work with other institutions such as the credit unions, the cooperatives, the banks, in understanding their needs and the potential they have with a critical mass of people that may have a small business opposed to maybe a medium-sized company that has a different requirement of funding. So how are we creating these instruments, whether it's, for example, payment by results or a different scheme on trust funds, right? And all these processes are now being flushed into a technical assistance process to help them understand how to incubate their business idea. What are the weaknesses? Do we have a diagnostic tool for them to understand where are they falling? They're dropping the ball because probably they don't know, and we need to train them. We need to educate them, and probably we need to be side by side working with them while they learn and empower them to grow also their business along with trusting themselves, because not because they're a return migrant or they are someone with a special disability, or maybe it's an abused woman that is running away from an abusive home to try to bring the food to their kids on their own. Now it's really powerful, all that kind of work. And I'm sorry for my bad English, because sometimes I feel that I don't make justice to the work that we do, but I'm trying to convey the message. I hope you guys are getting what I'm trying to say, right?
Absolutely. It is incredible what you're doing to help these people. I mean, these minorities are struggling with not being properly appreciated or given opportunities to fully engage, as you say, with like the sort of the making money and being able to take care of life beyond the, what was the term you used, putting food on the table or putting food on the plate. That's really important what you're doing there. Thank you so much for taking us through all that.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Hi there. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you mind leaving us a review, a like, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform? Thanks so much. That really helps our reach. The Founders Voyage podcast is now proudly sponsored by VidOps. Kane at VidOps has been taking care of our editing since early 2024. He works efficiently, and I'm sure you'll agree that he does a great job. Thank you to VidOps for helping bring this podcast to life. If you want the same great support we're getting for your podcast, or you need help with video, photography, or animation, you can get 10% off at vidops.io using our referral code Voyage. That's vidops.io, referral code Voyage. Now back to the show.
Can I ask you, as an experienced entrepreneur, when you do have someone who has this business idea and you're sort of taking them through to, or helping them to sort of get that process started, do you have particular resources or frameworks that you like to present them with to sort of better understand starting a business? Or how do you sort of approach that?
No, definitely you need a framework. Sometimes you need to start with something as simple as Business Canva, because they're mostly entrepreneurs that will start their business to survive. They're not thinking about scaling up. They're not thinking about a startup. They are thinking about a traditional business that might be known for them and that might be attractive to their community because they're obviously fulfilling a need. Eventually, we start with the canvas and then we start to adapt other methodologies. Swiss Contact has been working on this for maybe over 30 years. So they have developed a set of tools and frameworks that we use that are adapted to vulnerable populations. We have something called the systemic approach when we have all the players on the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we have to work with every single player in order to develop the system to be able to be more friendly with the entrepreneur. And then at the same time, working with the entrepreneur to understand their context. What is the type of business that will be needed in their community? Because what happens in Latin America, and I see Carlos is online and he can probably test my theory, right? When an entrepreneur in our regions see that a business is thriving, they want to do the same. And after a while, you get 20, 30 businesses doing the same, and it's not attractive anymore. So it's not generating any traction. So our biggest takeaway from the systemic approach in Swiss Contact is understanding what are the key sectors that are playing my community. Where can I link myself to a value chain on that small community, whether it's in agribusiness, whether it's in textile, whether it's in handcraft or any other sector, to make my business subject to scale? Or better yet, how can I associate with other people in the community? And instead of creating 20 bakeries, we can create something more powerful through association. And then you go into the whole incubation process that we might know, right? But this is something that's a fine line, right? Because although we try to make them thrive and give them this systemic approach in terms of understanding their context, you don't want to bias their business idea because you think it's not going to work. At some point, you have to let them take the risk, right? But you have to call what are the risks surrounded by taking that decision. And it's kind of an ethical debate because when I started working with these guys, I told them, you know what, but I cannot tell them where or how to start their business because I think is going to be the way, right? They may want to take a risk. They may want to say, hey, this is what I want to do, and this is where I can see the opportunity, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate you describing that because your role is so complex and interesting to me because I mean you're kind of like doing this like personal and kind of business coaching aspect as well, right? Like helping people kind of develop in their maybe ability to see that long term vision. And I really appreciate that. I feel like you're making impactful change on a multitude of levels. I don't know that you always get to, go back and hear from those businesses. I hope so sometimes.
Yeah, we do. We try to be in touch with them at least every 6 months.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I have a great story about a guy that we helped. This guy is a return migrant, and he, of course, went illegally to the US. When he went to the US, his daughter was only 3 years old. His name is Alvaro. And Alvaro actually worked in construction. Unfortunately, he was supervising a construction work, and one of the workers actually fall, and that was a fatality. The guy died. So Alvaro, of course, was charged and he served his sentence in the US. When he serves his sentence, he's immediately deported back to Guatemala. The guy was devastated. His daughter now is 18 years old. So 15 years later, he says, you know what? I'm over 50 years. I don't know what to do. I'm definitely not coming back to the US. I'm too old to make this again. So need another option. What can you offer me? We work with him on his entrepreneurial idea. He had this idea to make a sustainable chicken farm because he says, you know what, in my town, there is this local cuisine based on hen. So I need to get the hens and I also want to grow chicks. So can you guys help me with that? So we really incubated them and start working with them. And when I said them is their family, right? So the guy says, you know what? I want the incubation. So we did it. He actually won some seed capital that we normally give. The seed capital was his first hen and the egg incubation machine. So he started his chicken business. And 2 years later, I just talked to him before going to El Salvador. That was in January. The guy has already 1,800 chickens, 6 galpoons when he is incubating the chickens. And now he's starting to also grow cows and goats. From having nothing, being an ex con, now he has a business that is probably generating over $100,000 a year. And he's employing 9 more return migrants from our program into his business. So that's the type of impact that I was telling you, right? This is kind of fulfilling in the sense that you can see those success stories from people that if he had the courage to pay a coyote and go through the desert and tried to look for a better future for his family, he definitely has the courage to become a successful entrepreneur. And this is where we can help them. That's the fulfilling part. Alvaro is. I'll try to send you a video that we have with him, and you guys can take a look at it. But it's a really inspiring story. And like Alvaro, we have many more people that we have helped on that regard, right? I remember when he opted on his first credit, and he was like, wow, I can't believe, and now I have this successful business when I was no one, and look at me now. And he's really proud, and he should be.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so glad that you get the opportunity to follow up and hear those stories because I'm sure it gets you through the tough times too. I also want to make sure I read this. So, in response to you addressing Carlos earlier, he said it happens here 100%. Haha. I think it's because in Latin America the goal is to get some money out of a solution instead of solving a need. And then to your comments about the the story about the growth in the chicken farm. He says, "Wow!" So we're very, very excited to hear that story. I'd actually like to pass to Giovanni, who has a question for you, if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
I heard a lot of insights, and they were very very powerful for me. I will have a quick question coming from my curiosity. Is related to your last point about small farmers. When it comes to turning farm waste into energy, like biogas systems, do you think that that kind of solution can really work for small farmers, especially when the resources are limited? Thanks a lot.
Sure, no worries, Giovanni. Thank you so much for your question. We actually have done a little bit of work with small farmers and biogas through the biodigestion services that they produce the methane, and then you burn it and produce the energy. And then the waste, you use it in biofertilizing. So the thing is that if it's really a really, really small farmer, the amount of energy you can get out of this, it's not that significant. So you have to be able to scale at some point, managing that waste, and then the mix up between the animal and the vegetal. And we can get technical on this, and I don't like it. To scale that solution is really hard. So that's one of the things that we should be careful, because yes, it's a solution that works, but at, until what point is really profitable for them or beneficial in terms of reducing the cost of operation? It's something that you might want to address on a case by case basis. Or if you put them all together because they're part of the same community, you can work out the biodigestion services for all of them. And that might be something that's quite profitable.
Colin, it just seems like you've done at least a little bit of everything. It's amazing. I'm really, really impressed with like the breadth and depth of your knowledge about various topics. Thank you for coming on and sharing with us. Now, what I would like to do is sort of twist the topic a little bit. We've talked a lot about what you've done in the past and what you're doing at the moment. Could we, for a moment, look to the future for you? What do you see as like sort of your plan for the next 5, 10 years? And with the things that you're focused on now, what would you see as being success in those areas?
Well, Nancy knows that I've gone through a lot of changes lately. My mom passed away in January. At the same time that I knew that she got cancer, um, my boss in Swiss Contact told me, you know what, he will be becoming the country director in a different country, so you have to move. So everything was happening so fast. And at the same time, that I will be totally honest with you, to be able to know what I'm going to be doing in 5 to 10 years after everything that has happened lately, it's difficult. Because life can change at every time, right? So at least you have an idea of where do you want to go, the things that you want to do, and then the reality hits you. But at some point, it's good to have the idea, right? Because if you don't know where you're going, means that you're probably already there. So I'm gonna try to answer the question in the best capacity based on that premise, right? Where do I see myself in the next 5 years? I'll probably keep evolving on the development world. International development has been something really interesting to me, not only working on an international NGO like Swiss Contact, but also as an entrepreneur. I think there is a lot of potential because development opportunities are there, and we definitely have to seize that opportunity, and especially if that opportunity is leading to a meaningful impact. So I'll probably carry on the development world. 10 years? I don't know yet. Sorry if the answer is not what you were expecting, but with all these changes that I've been through lately, I honestly don't know how to answer and tackle that question.
Totally understand. I'm so sorry to hear about that.
No worries.
I know, and you have been through so much, and I really appreciate how resilient your mindset is. I thought that was such a great quote. If you don't know where you're going, you're probably already there. But you seem to have found that balance with, having ambition for where you'd like to go, and also knowing that you have to plan for the unknown by just being as ready as you can. And I'm truly sorry that your mom passed away. And I can't even imagine like how that was like trying to like move country as you were going through all of that. I was actually remembering one of our prior conversations where you were telling me about how at a time it had been helpful to you to hold a business presence in the US. And I was wondering if you could, just because we have an international audience, kind of tell us why that was helpful to you at the time. And then I'm curious, if you still have that and why or why not.
Yeah, that was part of the business that I actually sold 2 weeks ago. We had an LLC in Delaware because for Latin America, the regulation to raise capital is quite difficult. So we normally establish US presence in order for us to get access to some funds that are really interesting for us. So we did it for quite a while. Honestly, it helps us establishing the international operation beyond just the Guatemalan border. We have a few clients in Mexico, another one in Chile, and it was way easier to process transactions through the US than doing it from Guatemala. So if you're an international entrepreneur, that might be a good incentive to think about setting up a presence in the US. But of course, you have to understand what are the implications of doing it tax-wise. That's one of the things that we need to be very well aware. I think it was beneficial. The net effect it was beneficial for us. Helped us out setting up the presence, but also establishing some sales and also raising some capital. I would say that would be the short answer, right?
It's interesting the complexities of trying to move money, get funding, all that sort of thing. I didn't realize that it would be so much easier if you had that American presence.
Oh yeah, yeah. Specifically in countries that are not that good in regulations for funding startups, and Guatemala is one of them. Now, Colombia, for example, or Argentina, they have very strong regulations, and they even have their own local funds. Might be a lot easier for them to do it. But in countries like Guatemala or even Salvador or other countries, it's really a challenge because when you get an investor that is really interested in working with you because he truly believes your project has an opportunity, then you have a local barrier because there's no regulation or incentives to mobilize the capital to fund your startup. So that's when it becomes tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we are running into the end of the hour, and so I do want to treat your time with respect, but we do have one last question that we like to wrap up with, which I think you may recall. Do you have time just for one more?
I'm about to catch a train, but I'll try to make the time without losing it.
Okay, perfect. The question is just what words of wisdom do you want to leave us with today?
Oh, well, I think you have to be prepared for everything. As I was sharing the story with my mom, you know that situation can change from one day to another and you can't really be prepared for everything. But at least if you know where you're going, as I said, you might have some tools to face those challenges. I mean, I will have never expected to be facing this situation and then having to move abroad. That actually triggers the exit on my startup, which was a good thing. It was a domino effect, right? So I think nobody will teach you how to be ready for that. But as long as you have like the sense of purpose and direction of where you want to go and what you want to do, I think you'll make it.
I think you gave us several things to ponder there. I really appreciate it, Colin. And I know
Thank you
you've
guys.
just been on the go constantly lately. So I really do appreciate you making time for this. Thank you for everyone that made time to join and share. We appreciate you bringing your perspective and energy to these discussions. And Spencer and I feel fortunate to be part of this community with you and for the opportunity to bring you cooperative learning experiences. Yeah, please feel free to nominate other people that you feel like would benefit from this experience. Colin, I hope that this leaves you in some way inspired as it leaves us. And we look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
All right. I hope you catch your train. Bye.
You've just finished another episode of Founders Voyage, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The team at Founders Voyage wants to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and if so, please share this with someone else who might enjoy this podcast. You can also support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and by donating to our Patreon. Outro music today is Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band.